Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Over the course of this offseason, I have done a lot of work with Brad Ward from the OBR. So what I want to do over the course of the weekend or the couple of videos here is talk to Brad and kind of put a bow on a couple of conversations and debates that we have had over the offseason now that we're at the point where OTAs are starting. You know, we got the lingering question of Nick Chubb, right, that we still don't 100% know which way that's going to go. But for the most part, some of the things that we have been talking about have been answered. And let's start with the juicy one, right? I think the biggest debate we got into all summer, well, not summer, it ain't even summer yet. That's crazy to think about, right? All this stuff, the Browns off season. We aren't in summer yet. We got a whole month until summer, right? But one of the things we argued about a lot was the quarterback room, right?
Yes.
Because it was in such an incomplete state for the majority of the offseason period. Now the Browns get to the draft, and, you know, the funny thing that I think is interesting is before the draft, people were like, the Browns don't have enough quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
You know, they only got 2 on the roster. Everybody understood Deshaun didn't count. Now it's like, oh my God, 5 quarterbacks on the roster.
5.
And it's this big thing here. You were very critical of the quarterback room coming into the draft. How do you feel about the quarterback room with the addition of Dylan and Shedeur to what they have in there with Bill Musgrave?
So, well, to be fair, I was the most critical when I thought they were going to go, when there was the rumors about Carson Wentz. Remember? This was okay. So at the time, I was like, okay, we got Kenny Pickett, who I'm not a fan of, but we'll see how he works out, right? They seem to be high on him, whatever. But at the time, I was very down, not a fan of Pickett. And there was the rumors of Carson Wentz, which really sent me into a tailspin. So I was probably enraged a little bit too much at the time. And you brought up the great point that it was incomplete. But at the time, you know, we were thinking what would complete the room would be Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
Which doesn't look like it'll come to fruition. Now, I did think that the Flacco signing was at least legitimized the room somewhat, right? You know, there's some proof of concept there. So that'll legitimize it a little bit, raise the floor a little bit for me. Like, okay, he can get hot and win some games, even if it's like in the beginning of the season. So going into the draft, I felt a little bit better than when we had that conversation where I thought they were going Wentz, Pickett, and I was thinking this is just garbage, right? So the Dylan Gabriel thing, like, I didn't like the pick, Hugh, but I'm such a Stefanski, like, guy, and this is such a Stefanski pick. So, like, this is Stefanski's guy. So if I believe in him like I believe in Kevin, then I kind of have to get behind this pick because this is his guy, right? Like, this, I mean, they had this guy circled and like 75 times and highlighted and met with his family, and we saw the video and stuff. So this was their guy. And then I feel better.
Pretty early, it feels like they had him earmarked for that pick there, right? Like, I think they knew going into it that was one of the guys they were going to go for.
Yeah, it does. It felt like we didn't know, but it seems like afterwards it was pretty evident that they were targeting him for a long period of time. So, and there's a lot of touch points, as Andrew Berry talks about. We didn't realize they were out in Oregon and stuff like that, right? Meeting with him and his family and everything. So, while I didn't think that was the greatest use of a pick at 94, a top 100 pick, if it's Kevin's guy, it's Kevin's guy, right? Now, the Shedeur Sanders thing just throws the whole thing for a loop because he raises the ceiling, for me, of the room. and he gives you more hope than Dillon Gabriel gives you. Now, I'm not writing off Dillon Gabriel to say that he's going to be terrible or anything, but I think part of the reason the Browns got a lot of national like A+ grades, which are worthless, the draft grades are worthless, but a lot of the reason that people gave them high grades nationally was because they took 2 quarterbacks. So, and the value they got with Shador. So, do I feel better about the room? I do. Is it great? No, it's not great. But what they did do ultimately, Q, is they got 2 first-round picks in the first round next year. And that is, I feel like you have a year to figure out what you got with these guys. And if there's any question about it, then you're swinging again in the first round next year with your 2 ones.
Yeah, and if it's I think with next year too, right? There are situations where you might see something you like and still take a quarterback next year, especially if you get a pick and somebody's undeniable coming out the college. Look, if Peyton Manning wasn't enough to stop the Colts from taking Andrew Luck, right? Like, if
Facts.
it's that kind of prospect, it's that kind of prospect. And it could be a Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees situation where you let one go, but you get some value on the back end for a guy. And I wouldn't exclusively think of it as like these guys get 1 year. They're probably going to get a year and some change because, like, even if they draft the quarterback in the first round, they're probably not going to want that guy to play. So they're going to give this guy, possibly a whole nother year on top of that to be able to prove to somebody that he could be their starter, because it would benefit the Browns if they could flip. Let's say they fall in love with Lenore Sellers. Lenore Sellers becomes Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, Joe Burrow, one of those prospects. They get the number 1 overall pick somehow, and they take that guy. Okay, that's going to be your future, obviously. You invested the house on that. But if Shador is good enough, or if Dillon Gabriel is good enough to look like a starter for somewhere, you might be able to get a first-round pick or something back in return. If you're going to draft too many of a position, quarterback's the one to do it, because the returns you can get on anything that shines at the quarterback position, I think, is a lot better than what you could get elsewhere. And it brings me back, a couple of things brings me back to a couple of conversations we had, right? The extra first-round pick, and then also, Kirk Cousins, you brought him up.
Yeah.
This is a question I have for you. And look, I don't even know my own personal answer, so I think I'll discover it in this conversation. Would you rather spud a 5th 2-6 to trade for Kirk Cousins, or a 5th and 2-6 for Shador Sanders, which you ended up doing?
I think Sanders. I think Sanders. I don't. Kirk Cousins was going to be a 1-year stopgap, and I think Sanders is. He's not like your $5 scratch off. For me, he's like your $25 scratch off, right? Or he's like your $40 scratch off. Like, he's a little bit higher level scratch off than some other ones. You know what I mean? That
you know what it is?
Shot at.
It's not a scratch off. It's like. It's a lottery ticket that you're not going to make as much money, but the odds are so much better to hit, right?
Yeah,
like, it's not the $1 billion Powerball. I don't think you're going to get that. That's what Jalen Milroe was, right? Thin odds, right? But boy, you hit. You might hit the Powerball, right, and get somebody who could be a game breaker. Shador, if you hit, it's probably going to be in that Tua, Geno Smith class, right? Which is reasonable. But the odds that you get there feel a lot more reasonable for me than like betting on a long shot or something like that, right? It doesn't feel like a normal flyer in the 5th round. Now, that's just knowing what we know. There might be something behind the scenes that makes it a long shot, right? Like, that we just aren't privy to. But yeah, I kind of agree with you on that, where it's like, this season's going to be whatever it is. We got the extra first-round pick, and like, I don't want them to lose games this year, obviously, right? You want them to win as many games as possible.
This is what I was going to talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
But we can't ignore that we could be sitting in November, and the upside to losing could be tremendous.
Tremendous. Yeah.
Like, and if it's one of those situations, you know, I'm hearing a lot about this Mendoza kid in Indiana. He just transferred there. Like, if it's one of these situations where it's like, hey, man, Drake May, Jaden Daniel level prospect, two of them are coming out next year. You got to go get one of them. I understand that it will suck for a year, but I'd rather go through that than keep trying to string it out like Pittsburgh's been with quarterbacks, right? Like, I don't want to go another 6-7 years of like, we'll get this guy and figuring out who our starting quarterback is going to be in August. So if that opportunity comes up, the Browns can't ignore that they have to be in a spot to take advantage of that. You get Kirk Cousins, you're kind of locking yourself in to only the one possibility of trying to make the playoffs. Whereas now you have a situation, if you're the Browns, where you could be very happy with a not so great win-loss record because you might have just saw something from a quarterback or the young guys that you've taken. Maybe Jacksonville stinks it up, right? And there's a lot of different ways now that you could be happy with this season, even if the win-loss record is not amazing, which if you went for Kirk, you're betting on that win-loss record being at least above 500.
Yeah. See, I think when we really had the argument about the quarterback room, and you were making the point that it was incomplete, and it is a correct point at that time as I look back on it. But at the time, I was real dug into that, like, they had to go out and try to win like 10 games this year. And to keep Stefanski and Barry in place and not to go through the rebuild. Like, I was like, they got to win X amount of games. So they need to push in at some level of competency at quarterback. And I think that what I've come to realize is not that they can't win games this year, but that there's maybe a more creative path to them trying to do that, and maybe success in 2025 looks a little bit different than initially I thought. Like, success may be playing your young players and setting yourself up for what could be just an incredible upside in the 2026 first round, right? Quarterback, you have a second pick, depends on what Jacksonville does, obviously. But solving these issues for the next 10, 15 years is more important than anything that you could have achieved with Kirk Cousins, or at the time what I was arguing about, like, you know, Russ Wilson or whoever I was advocating for in the quarterback room back when we had that conversation. So, yeah, I think that I'm not saying that they're tanking. I'm not saying anything like that. I don't want to see them lose games. But I think that you can find the season will go how it goes. And they have two picks regardless. If they have to get aggressive and get up and make a move for a quarterback, they can. But I think success this year will look like the young players taking strides. Your running backs, your running game taking strides, your offensive line pieces that are younger, Zinter, your left tackle, all these guys taking a step forward. The guys that you brought in on defense, you know, Carson, and we're gonna find out what's up with MJ Emerson, and you're gonna know more about what you need to really make a push in the coming years and hopefully solve the quarterback problem for good.
Yeah, I think success this year looks like understanding that you want to see that new core form, right? You know, you got Miles, you know, you got Denzel, right? It doesn't seem like it seems like Nick Chubb's days of being a main contributor to this core are likely up, whether he comes back or not. Like, it just seems like it's at that point. They drafted 2 running backs. So you have to have other guys. Like, Joe Bitonio is probably going to retire after this season, right? Like, if you get through this season, right, and it can be, you could have a bad win-loss record for a number of reasons. Maybe somebody gets hurt. You know, you get bad luck. horrible field goal kicking, right? Like we know that there's a lot of different ways you can lose a game by still playing well. But if you feel really good about like a couple of the draft picks, right? If Quincy, one of the running backs, shows that they could be a starter, if you love what Mason Graham's doing in year one, right, and you feel very encouraged, Schlesinger shows, you're like, okay, I've seen a good amount there. We feel like there's a young nucleus there that we can build around. You also, like, I think like win-loss record aside, because I don't know how much the win-loss record is going to make a difference on what's going to be success for the season, because I'm not confident this team's going to make the playoffs. I just got to be real about it, right? As they stand right now. And I don't think they're viewing this as a year where they're trying to make the playoffs, like internally. It just doesn't seem like that, right? It seems like you don't make the trade you make at the top of the first if this is a year where you're like, we got to make the playoffs, right?
Right.
So because you're not going to trade for a first that you don't think you're going to pick with, right?
Right.
So if you're the Browns, I think the biggest, like the most successful season we can have is if we walk out of this season and we don't feel desperate at quarterback. Not that we got the answer, right? You know, or the franchise there, but if we don't feel desperate at quarterback, I think that is a huge win for the 2026 season. Like, if you can come out this season, one of these two show you that they can at least be a low-level starter, right? Like, you know, whatever happened to the Matt Schwabs of the world, right? Like that guy. Like low tier, right? You're like, you know what? If we have to go into next season, we might be able to put enough around Dylan or Shador, right? To make something happen, right? To get excited about. Like, if you walk out of the season feeling like that, knowing you have plenty of options to go get you a quarterback, both in free agency, in the trade market, right? I brought this one up. This would be a hilarious one, Brad, but Baker could be a free agent next year, right? Like, he does hit the market. Now, he probably isn't going to hit the market, but there might be a contract dispute there between Tampa Bay and him because he's getting closer to 30 at this point. You know, is that something you're like, well, do you want to consider that? That would be crazy, but
yes,
it's Cleveland. Crazy's on the table, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that could happen is like Brock Purdy could be shook loose. It seems like they want to get rid of Dak. And if he doesn't have a great year with these two, then maybe that's something. I'm not saying that these are anything to be excited about, but they're going to be options that they have to explore in 2026 that just weren't available to you in 2025. And if you can just get to that market and not feel like the Giants did this year, right?
Yeah.
Where the Giants were capital D desperate.
Yeah.
Then I think you're in a fine place going forward. Now, what I mean by desperate is like, okay, you're not going to try to force quarterback at like if you got the 15th pick, right? If you got the top pick in the draft or a top 5 pick, you want to take a quarterback, I ain't got shit to say to you. Even if we're not desperate at the quarterback position, I ain't got nothing to say to you. That's fine, especially if one of these quarterbacks look like they're worth it. But as long as you're not desperate at quarterback next year, I think that's a win.
So what does that look like for you? Like, so what does that look like for you so you're saying like you might be fine to go explore those options in free agency then rather than double up those first and go up and make sure you get somebody if say you're at like pick 15 and 12 or something like that?
Well, it's all about options because, like, let's say 2 quarterback desperate teams got the top 2 picks.
Yeah.
And then you're shit out of luck. Right? If this like a top 2 quarterback draft, right? Like if the guys did you want to go on 1 and 2?
Don't we expect it to be more than 2 quarterbacks in this draft, probably?
Probably, but it might be a situation where 2 are clearly a cut above the rest, right? There's like there's like Jaden Daniels, there's Drake May, there's Caleb Williams. And then, like, you know, you're taking a bit more of a risk with Bo Nix and Michael Penix. And then, what's the guy who hasn't played yet? Seems like they don't want him to play in Minnesota. Michigan kid. JJ McCarthy, right?
McCarthy.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, then there's that class, right? If you're in that first class of prospect, or you can get in that first class of prospect, I would prefer that over everything. Right. If you can get there. But if you can't, then you might want to explore options where it's like, okay, well, you know, we're sitting at 16. Do we move to 9 to get a guy? Like, how confident are we that that guy is going to hit? If you're confident, then go ahead and do it. I'd prefer you draft one than sign one because you don't want to deal with another contract at the quarterback position. But, if the goal is to get a quarterback that offseason, you have to make sure that your other options are explored there as far as what you want to go. Probably who would be the best guy to say they don't care about height, so maybe Kyler is somebody they look at.
Right. There you go.
They get somebody shorter than Dylan Gabriel in there. But yeah, maybe that's a route they go. There's a lot of different ways it could play out, right? I think there's going to be like 6 quarterbacks that are going to be in conversation. We got to see how college football season goes too, because some of these guys can have disappointing years. Some of them can stay in college, take some extra money for NIL. So you want to keep your options open because you don't want to bet it all on we're going to get a top 2 pick this year. We're going to take a quarterback in the top 2, and then you get there and it's like Mendoza stays in college and so does Lenore Sellers, and now it's about the 2027 class, and you're sitting there, all your ducks in a basket that didn't come to fruition. That's my whole point there with like making sure you keep your eye on other options because you don't want to just get locked in to we're just going to draft them, because that's how you could just be like, we're just going to draft them. You get to 2 and you're like, we got to draft somebody. So you just take a quarterback there at 2, and we're having the same conversation we had last year.
Same conversation. Same conversation. Yeah. So I get your point about, not being desperate, but like, I'm like, listen, with the 2 quarterbacks you drafted and 2 ones next year, like coming out of the 26th draft, I think you should know or have a good idea of who your quarterback of the future is.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
What years did you say again?
So with the guys you got, not that, expectations are super high on them, but I mean, I have reasonable expectations that Stefanski bet enough on Gabriel that he thinks he can do something. And then you've got Shedeur, and you've got, I guess, Kenny Pickett, whatever that looks like, if they think that he is a long-term solution. But he's a 20-something quarterback, so it's a swing, right? Okay, whatever. And you have 2 firsts next year. So if you're not great this year and you're not going to, be super competitive as a playoff team, you should leave the 26th draft, in my opinion, either knowing who your quarterback is on the roster this year because somebody played well enough that you're ready to go all in and put weapons around them, or you have addressed it in the 26th draft. But you're saying don't get locked in on that like that. You're saying make sure you have other options. I'm saying, like, after the 26th draft, you should know who your quarterback of the future is. Ideally.
I think that's the hope for them. I think that's the hope that they walk out the 26th draft, and whether that guy's a veteran or a quarterback that they drafted, they feel like they have the future in 26. The nightmare is that like a bunch of these guys go back, and then it's like, oh shit, the 27th class is going to be fucking loaded. But like, then you start to have real conversations about, hey, you hold this together for another year. And that's why if you have one of these young guys pop up, so you're not desperate and you're like, we can hold it together actually another, let's give Shedeur or Dylan another 4 years of starter and see what they do. Then, the upside is if they have a back-to-back good season, okay, cool, that's the guy. We can roll with them. And the downside is if they stink, then that 2027 class is loaded. So it's just, you want to, if you have them, one of these quarterbacks put you in a position, even if it's Kenny fucking Pickett, one of these quarterbacks put you in a position where you're just not desperate, then you're going to be able to make the best decision to find that quarterback in 2026. Whereas like, if you are desperate, then it don't matter what happens.
You'll be reaching.
You got to take somebody, right? And that's what I want them to be able to avoid here.
So what I would, the thing that I get scared about when we talk about that is like, I don't want not being serious about competing in 25 to turn into not being serious about competing in 26. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think if we get to the part, like this is why I'm like, they got to do something in 26, right?
Right.
Either that season is going to be about building around whatever quarterback they draft in 26, or maybe it's a year where like, nothing went our way. But you know what? Shador played well enough. 26 is going to be about Shador, right?
Okay.
Like somebody, you're going to put stuff around him, right? To see like, hey, can this guy succeed? If he succeeds, cool. Like gone as planned. Let's win some football games. You're going to bring some veterans in to try to maximize. But I think 26, they're going to put a lot. It's going to be like, remember the 2018 offseason where they got Jarvis Landry? Like it wasn't all of these like, we're going to win a championship right now moves, but they made a lot of moves to get a lot better.
It was a step forward,
right?
Yeah,
and I think that's what 2026 offseason is going to be regardless, right? You're going to want to win some games in 2026 or at least find out about somebody that showed some promise or find out about somebody you draft. So that's what I'm saying here is I don't think they're going to go into 25 and be like, they're going into 25. They know what it is. 26, they're going to try to make the playoffs with somebody. The question is, who's that somebody going to be? And is it somebody on your roster right now? Or is it somebody you're going to have to draft?
Gotcha.
And it's more along those lines. So that's kind of what I envision the hope is for them.
Makes sense.
How they will kind of manage for worst case scenario and what can protect them from worst case scenario. And I think that's why if we walk away from this season and we think for any reason, I might want to give quarterback X a full season as a starter. That is a win. Okay?
Yeah.
That is a huge win for the Cleveland Browns.
If you want to see more, that's a huge win for sure.
Yeah. So, what we don't want to do is feel like we did about DTR, about all these quarterbacks, and then, we're truly we're really hoping the draft bails us out at that point, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you could do something like, oh my God, let's get Kyler Murray because we don't like any of the quarterbacks in the draft. Let's go spend 3 first. And that's where I'm like, I get nervous about that scenario with
For
you.
sure. The desperate.